Okay, in this video I'm going to set up the character that we've imported into the Unreal Engine, and use the animation that I've created to play that on the character, and actually set it up as a playable character using this third-person blueprint that's available. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is create something that's called a blend shape, and that's just a way to actually blend between these animations relatively seamlessly. So I'm going to right click here and go to animation, blend space 1D, and I'm going to pick the Trevor skeleton, and I'm going to call it idle underscore walk underscore run, as this is going to be a blend space that uses these existing animations. Okay, so what we get in here is this graph down the bottom with a value, and that value by default ranges from 0 to 100, and we can actually place different animations at different points on this graph, and as this value changes it will blend between them. So we'll do that by, I'll grab the idle and put it at the beginning, and you can see it actually starts playing, and at the end I could add the run. And so you can see now that as I blend, it actually starts playing, blending into the run. And I can put in the middle, maybe just over to the side here. Oops, not the idle. I'll undo that. Put across the walk. And now I can actually click and drag on this little green thing to blend from the idle to the walk, and then from the walk to the run. Now it's important to note that to make sure that this blends, I believe it's pretty important to make sure that your walk cycle and your run cycle kind of are starting on the same foot. Otherwise I don't think they blend together quite so well. But as long as you've done that, they should blend together pretty seamlessly. Okay, so we're going to just change some settings on this. I'm just going to expand this section up here. I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to say the value of this horizontal axis is going to be called speed, and the maximum axis value, let's make it 600 to start with. Okay, and we're going to change the interpolation time to 0.1, just so that it kind of blends relatively, like has some blend time. So this is basically when the value quickly changes between these, how long does it take to interpolate. Okay, and that should be it for this blend shape, blend space. So I'm going to save. Okay, it's also handy to just press save all to actually save everything you've got, and just routinely save your project. Okay, so now we need to create a something called an animation blueprint. So we will need to do a tiny little bit of work with blueprints, which is like the Unreal Engine's visual programming language, and it's a way of doing programming without actually having to write code, but you can actually use nodes, kind of like what we did with the materials, to do kind of simple logic stuff. So we don't have to do too much of it because we're going to be using the third-person template character blueprint to get our character working, but we do need to make this animation blueprint. So I'm going to right-click and go Animation Blueprint, and I can leave the parent class section empty. It'll sort itself out. I just need to assign a skeleton and go OK, and I'll call it Trevor underscore anim BP. Okay, so I'll double click on that to open it. Okay, So we get these two graphs here called the anim graph and the event graph. First of all, we're going to use this anim graph. The anim graph kind of controls what is the final kind of output that's being played on our character at any given time, and the event graph is something that can kind of feed values into this anim graph. Okay, so over here I'm going to right click and just type I'm going to type state machine, because I want to add a new state machine. Don't worry too much about what state machines are at the moment. All that we need to know is that we're making one to get things working here. I'm going to call it locomotion. So this is the state machine that's going to handle all of our characters' locomotion, in which case it's going to be very simple because we only have an idle, a walk and a run. And that's all handled by one blend space. So we can see that in our list over here on the right hand side. I'm just going to drag that in, and that creates a state in our state machine. And I'm just going to drag from entry onto this this node, and that's that part done. And if we double click on here, we can see we have the idle, walk, run with a speed value, and when that speed value changes, we'll be able to use create a variable to change what that speed value is, which we kind of assigned in our blend space, and that will kind of feed this result. If we go back up, that in turn feeds this final animation pose. Oh, and we have to connect that. That's important. Okay, and we need to compile, and now it's actually playing that animation because it's picked it up from our state machine. Okay, we need to go over to the event graph now, and we need to grab this try get pawn owner node that is handily here by default, and I'm just going to grab this little blue node here and drag out, and I'm going to type what am I going to type? I'm going to type get velocity, and this is basically getting the speed of the velocity of our character, or the speed of it, and then we're going to just pull off from here, and I'm going to type vector length, and select that one, and this is basically measuring the velocity, and from here we're going to make a variable. So I'm just going to go over to this variables section over here on the left and click add variable, and I'm going to call it speed, and I need to change the type of the variable, so I'll change it from a boolean to a float, and a float is basically just a basic number with a decimal point. So I'm going to click compile, and the default value of speed is 0.0. That's okay. And I'm just going to drag this variable into our graph and click set speed. So basically what we're doing is we are going get pawn owner, which is the character, get the velocity of the character, turn that into a number that we can use, and then assign that number to our speed variable. And we need to actually connect this to this so that this set action actually happens. Okay, and we can click compile, and that should really be the extent of the blueprinting that we need to do for this little character. One last thing we need to do is go back to our anim graph and go back into our state machine. I just double click there and double click on this one, and we just need to grab that speed variable that we've created and pull it into the graph and go get speed. So we're getting the speed variable and pull it into the speed section that we have here. We can hit compile and probably save as well, and that has set up our character so that as the speed of the actual character changes, the animation should change as well. Okay, so I can close that now. The next thing that we need to do is we need to go and find the third person character blueprint and basically hijack it and put our character in instead. So I'm going to go to third person BP on the left here, go to blueprints, and there he is. I'll just double click that to open it up. And we can see here, this is some more of the complicated, or actually relatively simple, blueprints that are going on here to actually give us the actions the character can currently perform. We're just going to use what's already here and just replace the character. So I'm going to go to the viewport section over here, and there's the character. First thing we can do is click on mesh and change which mesh is being used. So we can change to a different skeletal mesh, and we can select Trevor. And what we can also do is we probably want to change this this capsule section here. So I'm going to go click on capsule component, and I'm going to change the capsule half height to probably something like 85. I think will work alright. And I'll just go back down to my mesh and make this negative 85, and there we go, that's pretty bang on. Okay, and change this value here to 0 as well. Okay. Alright. So I've just changed this capsule so it's a little bit lower so it matches the height of my character. I might change the radius down a bit as well. Maybe more like, maybe just 35. Okay. And this also, we have controls here for the actual camera and how far away that camera is. This is the third person camera, and the camera boom it kind of controls some other stuff as well. I want my character, I want the camera to pivot from basically the character's head or the base of the neck. So I'm just going to move this camera boom up so it pivots from that position there. That will do. And actually, before we go much further, we might set this up so that the animation is playing on it. So I'm going to click on my mesh, and we have a section here, animation mode, use animation blueprint. We need to define which blueprint we're using. So I'm going to click on here and find our Trevor animation blueprint and click on that, and there we go, now it's loaded that in. Okay, and if we hit compile, I think we should be good to go, and we should have a playable character. We can hit play. Oops, minimize that. And there we go. There's our character running around as a playable character. And so when I'm moving around, he plays the run, and when I stop, it plays the idle. And if I'm just using a keyboard at the moment, but if I just grab my my gamepad, so I've got an analog stick. If I push down slightly, it's just playing the walk, and if I start to push down a bit more, it plays the run and blends between those nicely. That's pretty cool. So we've got one last thing that we need to do, which is hooking up the props. So I'm going to hit escape there. So what we need to do is go back to our Trevor folder, and I'm going to double click on my skeletal mesh, and I'm going to go to the skeleton section over here on the left, and I just need to find those prop bones that I've created. So there's one here, prop R and prop L, and I'm going to right click on them and click add socket, and add socket, and I'll save that. I'm going to go back to our third person blueprint, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that Trevor folder, and I'm just going to click and drag the shield and sword meshes straight into this little section over here. And there they are. And I'm going to drag them both onto the mesh so that they're kind of children of the mesh. I'll click compile. And now on each of these I need to actually select a parent socket. So I can click this little button here, and this is the sword, so that goes in the prop R socket, and the shield goes in the prop L socket. And they're kind of floating off in space at the moment, but I can zero out their location and rotation. Now in the last video I kind of said that in theory if you set up the orientations and kind of align your props to your prop joints or prop controls in Maya, it should just kind of line up. When you reset everything and zero it out like I've done here, it should just pop in. However, I've come across a little bit of a problem, or not a huge issue, but a slight speed bump that is to do with the fact that Maya and the Unreal Engine have different up axes. So in Maya, the axis that points up is Y, and in Unreal, the axis that points up is Z. So when we exported these meshes, the FBX exporter did a bit of an axis conversion for us, so that these meshes are pointing still aligned the right way when we brought them in, which normally would be fine. But we want them to be aligned with joints, which have very specific axes, and they don't change when we import them in. So the result is that we just need to do a bit of rotation here. So I can click on the sword, and I'll go to the x-axis and type -90, and I think that should pop these in. -90 on both of these. There we go. And now it's aligned properly. So just a little bit of a extra step we need to do. I'll click compile, and we'll hit play, and there he is, running around with the sword and shield. And there's one last thing that we can do, and that is just to kind of check for foot sliding on our character. So what I can do is go into my content browser, and I'm just going to search for a material. So I'm just going to click on filters and click material. I just want to find a random material that I can chuck on this ground mesh here. I'll just grab this one here, that'll do. It's kind of it's not been unwrapped or tiled. It's not really tiling at all, but I might find something with a bit more noise maybe. That'll do. Okay. And so the reason I'm doing this is because I can't really see if the feet of my character are sliding with a solid grey material. So I just need a texture on it to kind of have a reference point. And what I can do while I'm actually playing this in the engine is I can type the tilde key on my keyboard, so that's just left of the #1 key on my keyboard, to open up the console, and I can type the command slow-mo, S-L-O-M-O, and then type a number, so say 0.2, to play my gameplay in slow motion. And now, if I use my gamepad, I can actually start to push on the stick, and I'll just try and get it to play a walk cycle. Cool, so it looks like the walk speed is fine, the feet aren't sliding. Let's push down on the stick completely, and you know what, I got completely lucky, and there isn't really any foot sliding. I think the feet are moving forward ever so slightly here, but that's actually pretty good. So the reason I've checked for foot sliding here is because most of the time when you bring something in, you won't be able to kind of, it might take a little bit of messing around to kind of match up the speed that your character needs to move at versus the speed of their actual feet as they're running around. So sometimes you need to kind of adjust that movement. Ideally, you probably want to actually figure out the movement speed first, and then actually set up your character so that it's moving at a certain rate. But in this case, I'm happy to just set it up so that it looks good in Engine. And yeah, so there we go. It's important to note that it's really good to block out your animation really quickly and get it into the engine straight away and test it and tweak it. The animation that you're seeing here, I kind of already tested it out in Engine and looked at it and seen how it was working and tweaked it so that it changed a bit. I think the run animation was playing a bit too fast and just looked a bit janky at first, so I kind of tweaked it and refined it a bit. And I kind of made some adjustments to it all. So game animation is very much an iterative process. So it's really important to kind of test stuff out really early and then refine it and then test it and refine it, and that's kind of a cycle that keeps going and going. Okay, so this is the end of the simple implementation of getting a game character working with a simple idle, walk, and a run. In a later video, I may see if I can show some more advanced stuff like implementing a jump and an attack. Okay.